Gary was in a rush to get home. He was supposed to come back from his work trip at the start of January, but he finished work early so he could come back soon. He was very pleased with the way things turned out because he could now celebrate the new year with his wife in their cozy house in the suburbs. He had purchased the house before marrying his wife Cynthia so that it would be ready for her when she moved in. He'd spent countless hours researching and inspecting properties, finally settling on this one because of its charming architecture, warm ambience, and close proximity to all the amenities they needed. Gary had a feeling that his wife Cynthia might not have made any preparations for their New Year celebration. His suspicion was confirmed when she told him over the phone the night before that she didn't find anything fun without him. She had said that she would celebrate the occasion with him in her dreams instead. Gary couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt at Cynthia's words. He had been away on a business trip, leaving her to spend the holiday season alone. Although he had tried his best to keep in touch with her over the phone, he knew that it wasn't the same as being there with her in person. He wanted to make it up to her by creating a special celebration for the two of them. And with this in mind, Gary made a stop at the store to pick up some essentials for their New Year celebration. As he walked through the aisles, he carefully selected sausages, salads, and champagne to create a festive atmosphere. He even added a bouquet of Cynthia's favorite flowers to brighten up the table and show her how much he cared. Filled with love and anticipation, Gary hopped into a taxi and hurried home, eager to surprise her. When he arrived, he was so excited that he didn't even bother to ring the doorbell. Instead, he used his key and quietly entered the house. As he made his way to the kitchen, he carefully placed the bags of goodies on the counter, trying to make as little noise as possible. He then tiptoed towards the bedroom, thinking that Cynthia was probably fast asleep. But when he gently pushed open the door, he was surprised to find that she wasn't there. Gary felt a sudden pang of worry. He wondered where his wife could be at this time of night. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Gary felt confused when he tried to call Cynthia, but her phone wasn't working. He found it strange because she had moved to this town from another place and didn't know many people. Also, she didn't have a job at the moment, so Gary couldn't think of any colleagues she might have gone to. Cynthia had been searching for a job for some time now, but unfortunately, she hadn't been able to find one yet. As Gary continued to wonder where she could be, he couldn't seem to come up with an answer. He tried calling her multiple times, but her phone was still out of coverage. Feeling worried, Gary decided to put away all the groceries he had bought earlier into the fridge. He then decided to make their home look festive and cheerful by decorating the Christmas tree with some toys and garlands. Gary was starting to feel more nervous. However, he suddenly had a thought that maybe she had gone to the store. He remembered that he had transferred her some money last night and had asked her to get something for herself. That's it. She loves perfume. She must have gone to get herself a present. Gary cheered up. He felt relieved and went back to prepare the table for their New Year celebration. He put all the dishes on the table and made sure everything was ready for their festive meal. His friend Sam had borrowed his car while he was away on his business trip. He needed to get the car back for tomorrow, so he decided to walk over to Sam's apartment, which was just a few blocks away. Just when he got to Sam's apartment building, he rang the doorbell, but nobody answered. He noticed that his car was parked outside the building, but he couldn't see any signs of Sam. Gary noticed that the lights were on inside. He must be watching TV or something, he thought. Gary felt relieved when Sam finally opened the door. However, he could tell that something was off with Sam's behavior. Sam looked surprised to see him and seemed nervous, which made Gary even more curious and concerned. Hey Sam, good to see you. Listen, I need the car. I have to run some errands tomorrow, Gary said, trying to hide his unease. Sam looked down at his feet and shuffled around uncomfortably. Oh right, your car. What are you doing here? I thought you were away until next week. Sam trailed off, looking more nervous by the second. How did you know I was supposed to be back next week? Gary smiled. Can I come in? I'm Gary, your friend, remember? Gary laughed. Sam looked extremely nervous and uneasy as Gary entered his apartment. Gary asked if everything was all right, but Sam didn't respond. As Gary hung up his coat, he noticed Cynthia's fur coat in the wardrobe, which immediately raised his suspicion. He made his way to the bedroom and swung the door open, only to find Cynthia lying half-naked on Sam's bed, the sheets covering her body. She let out a blood-curdling scream and covered her face when she saw Gary. Gary turned around, slammed the door, and marched back to the wardrobe. He ripped off his coat and snatched the car keys from the shelf. Sam was standing by the front door, but when Gary reached him, he halted and confronted him. Suddenly, a furious punch sent Sam crashing to the floor. He groaned in agony as he clutched his cheek. Gary walked towards his car, and as he approached, he noticed that there was a basket placed on the hood of the car. Just as he was about to inspect it, he saw a woman hastily running away from the car. "Excuse me, is that your thing on the hood?" Gary shouted at the woman. He was curious and wanted to chase her down to know more, but he had his own issues to deal with. As he neared his car, he heard a baby coo. As he leaned on what turned out to be a carry cot, he discovered that there was a baby inside it. Gary was now faced with a bigger problem. He tried to chase after the woman who had left the carry cot on his car, but she was nowhere in sight. He searched around the block but couldn't find her. He returned to his car, feeling even more worried and anxious. He returned to his car and placed the carry cot with the baby on the back seat. Feeling panicked, he decided to head to the closest police station to report the incident. It was already 4 hours before the new year, a time when nobody was eager to work. The officer was heard muttering to himself, "Oh my God, not on my shift." Gary was asked to wait. "Why do I have to wait?" he exclaimed. "I mean, this is not my baby. Someone left it on the hood of my car." Gary was lamenting, but the officer disappeared around the corner in the hallway. Gary understood that he wouldn't get any help soon, so he decided to take action. He opened the cover of the carry cot and saw some papers, including a birth certificate and a note inside a folder. The note read, "Your baby, your responsibility, asshole." Gary looked at the birth certificate and called his friend Tom, who worked for the agency. He asked Tom to check the database for information on the mother by using her name. "Gary, it's a few hours before New Year's. Are you crazy?" It's Tom. "Yeah, I know, but things aren't going well over here. I really need your help, Tom. I've never asked you for anything like this before. It's urgent," Gary pleaded. "You never change, Gary. You're still out there trying to save the world," Tom remarked and hung up the phone. In about 10 minutes, Tom got back to Gary with an address. Gary thanked Tom and headed there. Nobody answered the door. The apartment was giving off a smell of natural gas. He kicked the door and got in. He put the carry cot down on the stairs and ran through the apartment, covering his face with his coat. In the kitchen, a young woman sat on the floor, silently weeping. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Gary shouted. "We need to get out of here." He turned off the gas switch, opened the window, and helped the woman to her feet. He quickly led her out of the apartment and set her down on the stairs. As she looked up at him, he met her gaze. "Can you walk?" Gary asked angrily. The woman nodded, frightened. Gary picked up the carry cot with the crying baby and said, "Follow me," so that she wouldn't have any chances to object. He led her to the car, put the carry cot next to her, and drove to his house. After leaving the stranger with the baby in his house, Gary noticed that the woman looked like she hadn't been eating well. She also looked like she hadn't slept for a while. He pointed to her room and got her a glass of water. She gulped the water hungrily and raised her eyes. "Why did you get me out of there?" she asked. "Wow, are you saying you don't understand why I got you out of there?" Gary was getting angry. "I don't want to live like this anymore," she replied quietly. "Gene, what the heck is wrong with you people?" Gary was upset. "Then why did you leave your baby on my car?" Gary asked. "That was meant for Sam." "I thought it was his car," the woman said quietly. "Well, they'd send yours my car, all right? Sam just borrowed it while I was away. I hate him. I hate his guts. He's such a jerk," she cried. "Well, I guess that makes two of us. I don't like him either now. You can go ahead and use the car. Go ahead and use the bathroom. You'll tell me everything later. What's your name, by the way?" "Martina," the woman replied. "A pretty name. Are you from South America by any chance?" "No, my parents loved a character from a show." She washed her face, came back and sat on the sofa, and asked for more water. Gary brought her a glass of water, and she started to tell her story. Martina said that she had been working under Sam's supervision. They had started going out, and he had promised to take care of her and even marry her. On her birthday, Sam invited Martina to his place, and they had dinner. There were flowers and candles. He was so romantic. Martina had never had alcohol before. She got drunk quite fast and started to feel dizzy. When she woke up in the morning, she realized she had slept in his bed. Martina admitted that she used to be a shy girl and had never had a boyfriend before Sam. Sam eventually started to neglect her, leaving Martina feeling upset and distressed. What happened at Sam's place had left her in turmoil, as it was not what she had expected or hoped for. Martina had always planned to wait until marriage before being intimate with anyone and felt guilty about what had occurred. When she found out that she was pregnant, she approached Sam, but he refused to acknowledge any responsibility, claiming that it was not his concern. Martina expressed that she had initially decided to have an abortion and had arranged everything, including finding a clinic. However, when the day of the procedure arrived, she couldn't bring herself to go through with it and fled from the clinic. I just couldn't bring myself to kill a living being, Martina sobbed, her shoulders shaking softly. Gary felt sorry for her, and his anger towards his former friend intensified. When her parents noticed her belly, they kicked her out and told her to give up the baby for adoption. Martina couldn't do that either. She continued her story. She explained that some kind people had helped her with clothes for the baby. She went to her grandma's house after giving birth, but her parents found out and gave her an ultimatum: get rid of the baby or leave. Martina wiped her tears and said she didn't know what to do because she had no money or place to go, so she had to call Sam again. Sam told her to forget about him and never call him again. Gary sighed heavily. He couldn't believe that Sam, his friend all the way from high school, could actually turn out to be such a cruel person. Martina kept crying. All right, that's enough now. Please calm down, Gary asked her. The baby started to cry as well, and Martina stood up and picked him up. I don't even spare clothes for the baby. I think he's wet, Martina cried again. Gary noticed how tenderly she was looking at the baby, and it made him feel sorry. Let me see what we can do about it, Gary said, and quickly walked away. He came back with a box of old clothes. Here, it's my nephew's stuff in there. My sister moved out of here recently. She forgot her son's clothes. There should be enough. Martina looked at Gary and whispered, "Thank you so much." She hugged the baby tightly. Martina hugged the baby tightly to her chest and burst into tears again. I'm sorry, my little baby. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I will never leave you. Please forgive me. I was a fool. I will never forgive myself for what I had done, she cried. Gary looked at his watch and saw that midnight was approaching. It's almost New Year's and we should celebrate. Why don't you go ahead and change the baby's clothes? You can use my sister's clothes if you need to, Gary suggested. He went to the kitchen and retrieved all the bags from the fridge. He then proceeded to take the food out of the containers and arrange them onto plates. Are you guys ready? Gary shouted from the kitchen. Yes, I'm feeding my son, Martina answered and a little later added, I guess he was hungry. He fell asleep right away. Will you help me put these on the table then? Gary asked. Martina came out and lowered her head. Thank you so much for everything. I don't even know what would have happened if you didn't come after me. It's good that you understand, Gary smiled. The table was ready and the champagne glittered in the glasses. They watched Class in Grade on TV. Well, Happy New Year, Martina. I'm Gary, by the way, Gary said. Martina smiled for the first time and nodded. Happy New Year. As the baby slept soundly, Gary and Martina had a long conversation until early morning. This made him realize that he had been too quick to judge her before. Martina seemed gentle and innocent. Gary offered her to stay at his place for some time, since his 3-bedroom apartment was too big for him alone. Martina was too surprised to respond and just blushed. Gary went on another business trip the next day, leaving Martina the keys to his apartment and some money to take care of her son. When he returned a week later, he found the apartment was very tidy and there was a delicious dinner on the table. However, he was even more surprised when Martina told him that she had not spent all the money he had given her. How did you survive? Gary wondered. I was buying the cheapest and most necessary groceries. Thank you so much. I just didn't want to be a burden, Martina said and handed back the rest of the money. Gary couldn't believe how quickly things had changed for him. He was getting promoted at work, and this was going to be his last business trip, at least for the time being. He found it amusing how life could take unexpected turns. Martina and her son stayed in Gary's apartment for about 10 more days. One morning, she woke up early and began packing her things, getting ready to leave. She put her son's clothes, which Gary had given her, in the carry cot. Martina made breakfast for Gary and sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee and waiting for him to wake up. She was already dressed to leave. When Gary woke up and went to the kitchen, he saw Martina and the baby in the carry cot, and his heart skipped a beat. Even though it had only been a couple of weeks, he had grown accustomed to their presence. Good morning. What's going on? Where are you guys going? Gary asked Martina. Gary, I can't stay here forever. I gotta get going. I'm so embarrassed. You've been too nice to us, and I can't even repay you, she said, and tears welled up in her eyes. Gary's initial sadness was replaced by a deep sense of affection for Martina and her son. He walked over to her and gave her a warm embrace, holding her tightly. After a few moments, he spoke softly. You know, it's funny, but being with you and your son has brought me so much peace and happiness. I've never felt so attached to my home before. You've made it such a warm and comforting place to me, and I really don't want you to go. Martina looked up and smiled. After 5 years, Gary, Martina, Johnny, and little Sophia were enjoying their time at the park. They noticed a man sitting on the bench, wearing a tattered sweatshirt and appearing desolate. As he gazed at their family, his eyes shifted from Gary to Martina to the kids. Suddenly, the man got up and walked towards them. They were all astonished to see that it was Sam. Gary, Martina, you two together? Who could have thought? Sam said and started coughing. As he glanced over at the children, his eyes lingered on Johnny. Sorry, as he pieced together the similarities between himself and Johnny, his heart swelled with emotion, and he couldn't contain his feelings any longer. Just with tears streaming down his face, he fell to the ground and shielded his face with his hands, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions that had taken hold of him. Dad? Who is this man? Johnny asked. Gary paused for a moment, gazing thoughtfully at Sam. Then his eyes shifted to Johnny as he spoke with a gentle tone. That's Uncle Sam. He's been through some tough times in his life. He turned to his family and smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, you guys go ahead. I'll catch up with you in a moment. Gary led Sam to the side and told him something, after which Sam hugged Gary and quickly walked away. What did you tell him? Martina asked. Well, I gave him the words he needed to hear. With a loving kiss, Gary took the hands of their children, and they continued on their journey, filled with joy and contentment.